In the buzzing world of investigative journalism, few dared to delve into the realm of the supernatural, but Resbeer was different. His articles often straddled the thin line between reality and the eerie unknown, earning him a reputation as the bravest, or perhaps the most foolhardy, reporter in the industry. Growing up, Resbeer had always been fascinated by tales that made others' skin crawl. His grandmother used to whisper ancient legends to him, painting a world where shadows whispered, and the impossible became real. It was no wonder then that when the traditional journalism route bored him, Resbeer ventured into uncovering tales of ghouls, haunted houses, and mysterious vanishings. Sweden had always been on his radar, a land of deep forests, vast lakes, and ancient legends. The story of the Draugrs, undead beings from Norse mythology, had always intrigued him. But it was during a late-night deep dive into a CreepyPasta forum that he first stumbled upon mentions of Mr. Widemouth and Logging Jack. Both were spoken of in hushed tones, their stories whispered more as warnings than tales. Mr. Widemouth, a creature with an abnormally large grin, was said to convince people to commit dangerous acts, while Laughing Jack was a monstrous clown, luring children with tricks before subjecting them to unspeakable horrors. When that strange letter with its eerie challenge arrived, Resbeer felt a mixture of excitement and trepidation. Could this be the story of a lifetime, or was he about to descend into a nightmare from which there was no waking up? With a deep breath and a sense of determination, he decided to journey to Sweden, little realizing that he was about to be caught in a feud as old as time itself. The plane touched down on Swedish soil just as dawn was breaking, casting a golden hue over the landscape. The beauty of the scenery contrasted sharply with the dread gnawing at Resbeer's insides. The vast, dense forests, misty lakes, and distant mountains promised both allure and danger. Upon reaching the sleepy town closest to the coordinates from the letter, Resbeer quickly noticed the palpable tension in the air. People walked briskly, eyes darting around, as if expecting something or someone to jump out at them. The laughter of children was conspicuously absent, and the overall atmosphere felt stifling. Securing lodgings at a quaint inn, Resbeer attempted to strike up a conversation with the innkeeper, a burly man with a grizzled beard and piercing blue eyes. At the mention of the coordinates and the mysterious countryside house, the man's face paled. "You shouldn't go there," he muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. "Why?" pressed Resbeer, sensing a story behind the man's fear. The innkeeper hesitated, then began recounting chilling tales. Stories of howling laughter echoing through the night, toys appearing inexplicably in homes, and worse, reports of gruesome animal mutilations in the surrounding woods. As Resbeer listened, the hair on the back of his neck stood up. The tales seemed to echo the legends of Laughing Jack and Mr. Widemouth he'd stumbled upon earlier. The local folks, while initially wary, began to open up to Resbeer when they learned of his intent to investigate. They spoke of shadows moving unnaturally in the woods, of children waking up from nightmares screaming about wide-mouthed creatures and laughing clowns. They warned him of the old countryside house, rumored to be the epicenter of these occurrences, and urged him to stay away. Yet, with each cautionary tale, Resbeer's resolve only strengthened. He was here for answers, and he wouldn't leave without them. Preparing himself, he set out towards the ominous coordinates, the mysterious house, and the dark secrets waiting to be uncovered. Night had draped itself over the town, and Resbeer found himself poring over his notes in his dimly lit room at the inn. The only sound was the gentle scratch of his pen and the distant howling of the wind outside. He was engrossed in cross-referencing local stories with what he knew about Laughing Jack, trying to discern patterns. It was then that the temperature in the room seemed to drop suddenly. The candle on his desk flickered, casting eerie shadows on the walls. A sensation of being watched crept over him. Slowly lifting his gaze from his notes, he was met with a sight that froze his blood. At the foot of his bed stood a figure, tall and gaunt, with skin as white as porcelain. Its clothes were reminiscent of a Victorian-era clown, albeit tattered and stained with what looked disconcertingly like blood. But it was the face that was truly terrifying. Eyes dark as voids, a twisted, mocking smile, and long clawed fingers that played with an old wind-up toy. For a heartbeat, the room was silent except for the tinny tune from the toy. Then, breaking the silence, came a deep, guttural laughter that seemed to resonate from everywhere and nowhere at once. "Looking for me, Resbeer." The voice was taunting, dripping with malice. Laughing, Jack's grin widened, revealing teeth that were jagged and stained. Reacting quickly, Resbeer reached for the camera on his bedside table. But in the split second it took for him to grab it and aim, the entity had vanished, leaving behind only the mocking echo of laughter and a chilling cold. Shaken, Resbeer quickly packed his belongings. He knew now that the stories weren't mere legends. Laughing Jack was real, and he was right in the middle of his domain. But rather than flee, this only steeled Resbeer's resolve. He had a story to uncover, and he wasn't going to be deterred by a sinister apparition, no matter how terrifying. Resbeer's sleep was restless after the encounter with Laughing Jack, haunted by dreams filled with menacing laughter and shadowy figures. Waking early the next morning, he decided to visit the woods surrounding the town. Local tales had often mentioned the forest as a place where strange occurrences were frequent, and he hoped to find some clues there. The forest was a sprawling maze of ancient trees, their trunks gnarled with age, and their canopies so thick that they made the morning seem like twilight. A faint mist hung in the air, making the woods seem even more mystical. As Resbeer delved deeper, guided by the coordinates, the atmosphere grew increasingly oppressive. A small clearing up ahead caught his eye. At its center stood a curiously shaped boulder. But as he approached, Resbeer realized it wasn't a rock at all. It was a creature, hunched over and seemingly engrossed in something on the ground. It looked like a child at first glance, but its proportions were off. Its limbs were slightly too long, and its fingers ended in sharp, claw-like tips. But the most unsettling feature was its face, a face dominated by a grotesquely wide mouth filled with rows of razor-sharp teeth. Upon hearing Resbeer's approach, the creature, Mr. Widemouth, looked up. Instead of aggression, its eyes held a strange mix of curiosity and sorrow. Before Resbeer could react, it spoke, its voice a melancholic whisper. Another one drawn by the tales? Here to challenge or understand? Resbeer, finding his voice, replied, "To understand. To know what's happening in this town." Mr. Widemouth sighed, a sound filled with centuries of weariness. "Then understand this, human. My quarrel isn't with your kind, but with the monstrous clown who has made these woods his playground." Resbeer's mind raced. Here was a chance to learn more, to get an insight into the feud that was terrorizing the town. "Tell me," he urged. "Tell me everything." And under the canopy of those ancient trees, Mr. Widemouth began recounting his tale. A tale of friendship, betrayal, and a relentless quest for revenge. As Resbeer listened, Mr. Widemouth spoke of a time when both he and Laughing Jack were not adversaries but allies. They hailed from a dimension unknown to humans, a world filled with beings of immense power and intrigue. But a rift grew between them, starting as a mere disagreement but quickly escalating into a feud that spanned realms and ages. Mr. Widemouth described how Laughing Jack's cruel pranks had once been harmless, but over time, they grew darker, more twisted. Laughing Jack began taking pleasure in real torment, especially that of the human realm. The clown's transformation into a malevolent entity was complete when he lured an innocent into a trap, leading to a tragic end. Horrified by what Laughing Jack had become, Mr. Widemouth confronted him. Their ensuing clash was cataclysmic, tearing through their realm and spilling into others. And so, their chase began, with Mr. Widemouth trying to stop the clown's reign of terror and Laughing Jack always staying one step ahead, leaving chaos in his wake. Sweden became their latest battleground. The old countryside house? It was more than just a building. It was an anchor point, a nexus between realms. Laughing Jack had chosen it as his lair, drawing power from the veil's thin nest between worlds. As Mr. Widemouth's tale drew to a close, Resbeer felt an overwhelming mix of emotions. The tale was fantastical, yet the evidence of its truth surrounded him. Moreover, he began to realize the gravitas of the situation. Two powerful entities, one seeking vengeance, and the other chaos, with the town, and perhaps even more, in the crossfire. Determined to protect the innocent and, if possible, end this feud, Resbeer sought Mr. Widemouth's help. Together, they planned a confrontation with Laughing Jack, aiming to trap him and end his tyranny. In the following days, strange events intensified around town. Children reported seeing colorful balloons floating outside their windows, eerie music played from nowhere, and shadowy figures darted between trees. The townspeople grew more anxious, sensing the impending showdown. Resbeer used his journalist skills to rally the townspeople, preparing them for what was to come and devising safety measures. Simultaneously, he worked closely with Mr. Widemouth, unraveling ancient rituals and spells that might be used against Laughing Jack. As the night of the final confrontation approached, an unsettling silence blanketed the town, as if the very earth was holding its breath, waiting for the storm that was about to break. The game was set and the players were ready. The next chapter would decide the fate of all. The moon hung low in the sky, its pale light casting the Swedish woods in an eerie glow. At the heart of it all stood the old countryside house, now more foreboding than ever. The windows of the dilapidated structure seemed to gleam with an otherworldly light, while shadows danced menacingly on its walls. Resbeer, alongside Mr. Widemouth, approached cautiously. They had prepared an intricate trap, a combination of ancient spells and modern ingenuity, aimed at weakening and capturing Laughing Jack. But as they drew closer, a cacophony of haunting laughter echoed through the trees, sending shivers down Resbeer's spine. Suddenly, the ground beneath them lurched. Vines erupted from the earth, snaking towards them with deadly intent. Trees bent and twisted, their branches reaching out like gnarled hands. It was clear. Laughing Jack knew they were coming. Using a sharp knife, Resbeer quickly slashed at the encroaching vines, while Mr. Widemouth muttered incantations to ward off the dark magic. They fought their way to the house, where the real battle awaited. Inside, the atmosphere was thick with tension. Every shadow seemed to pulse with dark energy. And then, with a mocking slow clap, Laughing Jack appeared. His appearance was even more nightmarish up close, his grin malicious and eyes devoid of any humanity. "Did you really think you could stop me?" he sneered, his voice echoing in the confined space. Without hesitation, Mr. Widemouth lunged. The two entities clashed with ferocity, their powers sending shockwaves through the building. Walls cracked, windows shattered, and the very floor trembled under their might. Resbeer, though a mere human, wasn't just a bystander. Using the talismans and spells he'd gathered, he began chanting, creating a barrier around the house, trapping Laughing Jack inside. The clown's laughter turned to roars of anger as he realized the trap. But Laughing Jack was not to be underestimated. With a wave of his hand, he conjured illusions, ghostly apparitions, and nightmarish creatures to attack both Resbeer and Mr. Widemouth. Yet, amidst the chaos, a poignant moment arose. As Mr. Widemouth battled one of Laughing Jack's illusions, a memory surfaced, showcasing their past friendship. The two of them laughing, exploring realms, sharing adventures. The memory, though brief, seemed to slow time, and Resbeer noticed a hint of sorrow in Mr. Widemouth's eyes. Using this moment of distraction, Laughing Jack lunged at Resbeer. But Mr. Widemouth, reinvigorated by the memory, intercepted the attack, taking a grievous blow meant for the journalist. Resbeer, seeing his ally hurt, felt a surge of anger and determination. He focused all his energy on the central spell, reciting the words with more conviction than ever before. The room illuminated with a blinding light and a massive vortex began forming, aiming to imprison Laughing Jack. The clown struggled, his laughter now a desperate cry. But it was too late. The combined might of Resbeer's determination and Mr. Widemouth's sacrifice pulled Laughing Jack into the vortex, sealing him away from the human realm. As the dust settled, Resbeer rushed to Mr. Widemouth's side. The creature, though weakened, was alive. They had won, but the cost was palpable. The once majestic house was now in ruins, and the scars of the battle would forever mark the land. Yet, amidst it all, there was hope. Laughing Jack's reign of terror was over, and the townspeople could finally live in peace. Resbeer, with a newfound respect for the supernatural, chronicled the epic battle, ensuring that the bravery of those involved would never be forgotten. If you enjoyed this creepypasta, be sure to watch this next video on Jeff the Killer versus Mr. Widemouth.